And joining us is Member Wilcox, and Arthur is somewhere as well. So
He'll be up shortly.
Mr. Tamahiri here?
no.
By party.
Taipari. Okay.
Oh, he said.
I thought it was Tamahiri.
David.
You should be back in a minute. Just
Be in, it's interchangeable, Tamahiri and...
Right, we have our.
actually now this
I agree.
Glenn's replacing Taipari.
Bram.
Oh, Bram, I saw head to the toilet. Bram was heading to the toilet.
Time for another coffee, I think, after all that.
Three Musketeers.
Ready.
Right, we will resume and start the debate, and we have no more questions. So I have the Mayor, I have Councillor Darby, Councillor Penrose and Councillor Casey who wish to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And look, councillors, the expectation was that if we made this public, we would do this matter appropriate justice in the public eye, and I think we have. I want to, in particular, acknowledge, and I think it's a time for acknowledging because this is a significant milestone that we'll vote on today in what is a smallish in terms of dollars project, but very, very big in terms of vision for Auckland. I firstly want to acknowledge a guy called Bevan Woodward. When I first stuck my hat in the ring in 2009, I had with him one of the first meetings, and all hail the dreamers. He showed me a model of putting a walk and cycleway across the harbour bridge. He had one or two mates with him, and they were as determined as all hell and asked for my commitment, and I gave it. That, of course, comes off the back of people like Anne and all the residents over in Northcote who something like 30 or 40 years ago presented a petition for something similar. So this has been a vision that has been a long time in coming. But good things take time, and every project such as this has its time, and this is its time. I'm really proud to support the recommendation that's before us today as a way of getting it to its final position. What really got me going was not so much the beauty of the project and the simplicity of it, but it was this vision. The vision of taking the cycle and walk path from Devonport to St Heliers. It's a great, great vision, not just for cycling and walking in good health and the chance to see one of the greatest views on the planet as you're walking or cycling 17 kilometres around it. But to you, Councillor George, in particular, there are many projects that we've done over the last 6 years that we've done as a consequence of our being united. But this project is very much about the uniting of us, of bringing us together as a city. The second harbour crossing will have a similar focus. Rail in due course to the shore will also help, but this one is special. We've never had the chance to walk or cycle to each other, north, south, east and west. And so that's what I most love about this project. It's a uniting project. So I want to acknowledge Bike Auckland and Gen Zero and Aucklanders generally who have absolutely flocked to this project and have supported it massively. And it's fabulous to see. I want to acknowledge the Northcote residents too, because this project is another one of those refitting Auckland projects. It's damned hard to in-build a city. You know, we've got a discussion coming up over the next sort of month or so that talks about, in part, rebuilding and regenerating parts of our city. And when you're refitting a city, it's hard because you're dealing with people directly in their own backyard, literally. So when guys like Kevin turn up, it's really difficult. But what we are also gauging is listening to the broader interest of Auckland. Does the broader interest of Auckland by necessity outweigh that specific local interest? And if it does, how can we address their concerns? And listening to the local boards, and I want to acknowledge both the local boards who are here in support today, they've sort of reflected on mitigation as we go into final design stages. To the officers, Marguerite, Bram, thank you. Powerful lot of work. Johnny, huge amount of work, and you've presented really professionally. The councillors from all backgrounds and stripes in this debate have questioned you high and low, and you know, I think you haven't buckled or been swayed in any way. You've delivered really superbly, so thank you. You've done the council and the community a great service. I just want to reflect finally when acknowledging people, Barb. You know, a lot of people have real passion for the city, but she's reflected on the fact that in 6 years we've gone from non-cycle city to cycle city. In a very short space of time, we've really embraced cycling. And that is because she acknowledged we've worked together to achieve that, but we've got a broader working together. The government has actually backed it big time. So it's really enabled us to get projects going. Councillor Mike talked about Bevan and the fact that the earlier project, when it was brought to me, it was brought as a PPP project. This is the only way that we're going to get this going. And Councillor Mike, you're exactly right. And look, if it was starting now, going forward another 4 years of planning, it might be different. But it's not. This is what we've got. And Bevan was very clear, Len, this is a PPP, we see this as a public-private, and we've got one or two, you know, companies, etc., who are interested. The fact that it's the PIP fund is a brilliant connect. This is, you know, this is our Kiwi saver. This is public investment, in effect, in a public asset, even though it's a public-private partnership. So I have looked in real depth, really, over the last 2 or 3 years as we've developed the PPP proposal as a unique proposal. Smallish to start with, but I think the ideal start, I always felt that. And I think that it has sufficient flexibility, particularly for those who would at some point in the future want to address the issue as to whether or not a cross-subsidy could reduce the cost of utilisation. But it has to be said in all the listening that I've done, even to young Nico and the Gen Zero guys, all the listening, the specific issue of whether or not you would pay to go on the cycle walkway has not been the barrier to whether or not people would necessarily use it. Of course, the final price point is going to be an important discussion. But that hasn't been a barrier in the end that has said to people, no, we're not going to do it. So I think just reflecting on those 3 or 4 key issues, that the time is right now for us to shift it to the final design stage and to get a final project cost and get this job done. I just want to finally reflect on Jeremy's comments and his urgings that, look, you know, go back to the drawing board. There are other options. God, I heard a lot about that with CRL. You know, we're good at having long debates in Auckland. But please, as the United Council, I want to acknowledge you, my colleagues, all of you. We've by and large been able to keep the bit between our teeth and move at reasonable alacrity. And we should do it in this one too. A uniting project for the future of Auckland. It's a couple of projects on the books today that really tweak the imagination of our beautiful city, and this is one of them. And my hope is that we support them both, but in this one, I seek your support, and I'm sure that we'll move forward on this day.
Councillor Darby.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Mr Mayor, for leading that. Look, it's first also I'd like to thank Marguerite in particular for being at the coalface for this organisation for a long time on this project, John Duncan, Bram, Robert, Chief Finance Officer, for interrogating this project just as we had to interrogate the CRL. Thank you. Look, I've been involved with this for some time. I think it's running over 10 years now, and I'm not exhausted. I'm getting excited because we're coming to the closing line on this one, and it feels good, members. And as the Mayor says, it's our collective support today which is going to clinch this and put it made available for Aucklanders. 10 years ago, I remember meeting Bevan Woodward and another guy, Graham Knowles, and I want to remember Graham Knowles, who's not in Auckland now, I don't think. Graham Knowles was Barb Cuthbert's predecessor at Cycle Action Auckland, it was then, and he had that vision, and Bevan had that vision, and we stomped around, we went through the toll tunnel, Bevan and I, we climbed over motorway barriers, we were walking routes on the northern side of the bridge, we walked routes on the southern side, we imagined a promenade all the way through by West Haven there, and of course that's there now, we've done that. And we had a great time just visioning this project, but it wasn't one or two people, it was a wonderful gathering of people, and Heart of the City offered their offices on High Street there, and the support of that business association was very, very important. They were fantastic ambassadors for this project. And then we had in 2008, the spring Sunday in 2008, things got to a boiling point, and some of you might remember, and Councillor Lee, you were there with us, you spoke as well as I did, and it was a boiling point to at that time we called it the Get Across project, the Get Across project. Things have moved on a little bit. And 1,000 people gathered. I remember arriving there, I came by bike and ferry and bike with my then 9-year-old daughter, and we arrived there, and in anticipation you're sort of slightly nervous, oh there's only 100 people here, and it was half an hour to go, and with about 20 minutes to go there were 200 people, and then at speaking time it was 1,000 people, and by the time we were into the speeches it was a lot more than 1,000 people, and it was heaving to the edges of the reclamation at the southern edge of the bridge. And it was a fantastic event, and it was spontaneous, and I assure you it was spontaneous. There was no plan to break down the barriers and walk and cycle across that bridge that day, but we did, and we crossed it in our, I think, I don't know, a couple of thousand people, something like that. And it was 5, was it? Thank you. And the traffic was banked up all the way back to Otahu, I understand. But people at the front of that queue in their cars got out of their cars, some of them, and joined us as walkers and cyclists calling for a walking and cycling crossing on the harbour bridge. And media reported it, and the conversation of what we now call Skypath ran around Auckland and around this country, and it was terrific. But things happened a lot earlier than that as well. In the early 1950s, there was a design for a 6-foot walkway and a railway on the Auckland Harbour Bridge. Right. And a then incoming minister got a junket to LA, and he saw these wonderful freeways, and he quickly put a line, a big red thick line, through any prospect of a 6-foot walkway and a railway. Imagine what we would be looking like today as a city. Yep. Then, in 1980, a Northcote resident, Michael Bland, and his group called Path, 1979, also advocated for a walk and cycleway. But well before that, there's also an interesting fact, a farmer from Herne Bay, and Herne Bay was being farmed, Councillor Cashmore, you would have loved the pastures there. He saw the rich pastures, that beef pasture on the other side at Birkenhead, and he thought, how do I get access to that free feed? And he developed a floating pontoon system, which didn't quite work. No one knows whether he quite got his stock across, but everybody was yearning to cross the Waitemata, and we are still and will. A lot of history is there. That enthusiasm from 2008 really did make a difference. We crossed the bridge, we walked and cycled. I cycled up that bridge with my then 9-year-old daughter, and I distinctly remember my 9-year-old daughter saying to me, Dad, when you're driving it looks so steep, but it's so easy to pedal.
It is.
And it was, and I had to check myself at that point and say to myself, oh yes, it is. No one had, and then the conversation went around that day how easy it was to pedal. One of the key arguments at that time was, you can't cycle the bridge, it's too steep. And we have heard argument after argument, and I think I could probably count about 50 serious arguments why you should not be putting a walk-cycle crossing on the harbour bridge. Every argument has been addressed. It's been examined very, very closely. I want to also acknowledge Transit New Zealand at that time for being willing to take the microphone. I think they took Graham Knoll's megaphone that day that had been used for speakers, and then it was Wayne McDonald, the regional director, I think it was, for Transit New Zealand. He says, can we borrow your megaphone because we need to direct traffic? And it was a nice day in 2008. It was a feeling of Auckland coming together.